Hi, and welcome to Java Fundamental Data Types. I'm Norman McIntyre. Let's jump right into it. So the first skill point to keep in mind is what is a data type. I've given you the reference here for Wikipedia so you can read more about it. A data type is a data attribute which tells the language processor, so it could be a compiler, it could be an interpreter, it tells it more about the data. So in our case, since we're using Java in this course, it tells the Java compiler when it sees the data type, it basically tells it more information. For example, it tells it the size of the data. It knows, for example, there's a size difference between a byte versus a short versus an int versus a long. It also tells the range of values of the data, right? So we know the range of values, for example, for a byte are different from the range of values for a short, or different from a long, different from an int. It also tells the valid operations that you can perform on the data. So can you add it? Can you subtract it? Can you do other things to the data? Now, we care about these fundamental data types because they're used as the building blocks for the more advanced data structures that we're covering. So think of these fundamental data types as providing the core components that we then build upon and come up with more advanced data structures. Some of the data types we'll be looking at here, we'll be looking at the Boolean, which can be true or false. We'll be looking at the character. We'll be looking at numbers, both integers and floating point. We'll be looking at strings, and we'll be looking at date and time. Now, when you think about it, with these building blocks, with these fundamental data types, you can build upon these and build other data structures. So let's begin with the Boolean data type. First, since we're using the Java language, it actually has a primitive data type called Boolean, spelled in all lowercase. And this Boolean has the value of true or false. It also has, from java.lang Boolean, that's with a capital B, it has a class, a Boolean class, and it has a number of methods in there. The one that we're probably most interested in would be the parse Boolean. And so the idea is you give it a string, that string could say true or false, and this will parse it such that it returns a Boolean value, true or false. So it really converts from a string representation of a Boolean into the actual value of a Boolean. We also see how you declare it by using the Boolean. Here I just say Boolean, I would declare a flag, or here Boolean running equals true, or Boolean all done equals false. So we both declare it and assign it a value at the same time. Now the operations, we can do a not operation. So with that exclamation, it's the not, basically inverts the condition. We can have an and. So here we do a logical and of two values to see if it's true, if all the values are true. Or we can do an or. An or is true when at least one is true. So this takes us to our first coding exercise in this particular video. And as always, if you need to, pause the video. You should type in the same code as we're talking about and have it where it's running and working. Here I want to draw to your attention at line 4 and 5, we have two Booleans defined, an input 1 and an input 2. Notice at line number 7, we actually do an and condition of those two inputs. And so if we have a true and a false, then that and result would be false. However, at line number 8, since we have a true ORed with a false, an OR says as long as you have at least one of those true, the whole thing's true. So here we get the OR result. And we display those. You can see on the right side of the screen, we see the output. And result is false, the OR result is true. We then do, at line 13, we do a parse Boolean. And notice I'm parsing Boolean. I typed in all capitals of true. And notice that returned for us at line 13 a result, a Boolean result that was true as well. And then at line 15, we parsed one with false. And notice I purposely spelled it lowercase fa, then uppercase ls. I wanted to show it can be spelled something other than all uppercase or lowercase. And that, of course, returned false, gave us a Boolean result of false, which we then displayed. Again, I want to stress, pause the video if you need to, type in this code and run it. Make sure your output matches what I have here before you continue on. Next on our list is the character data type. The character data type, this is a single Unicode character. So for example, the character J would be a char, a character data type. Just like we saw, the Boolean had a primitive type called Boolean, and also it had a class called Boolean. Same thing here. We have a char, which is the primitive data type, and we also have a Java lang char, which is the class. The reason the class is important, particularly for a character, is we can do things like define, is it a letter? So the character class has a static method, isLetter, to tell us whether we've got a letter, or toLowercase to give us a lowercase value, or toString to tell us, convert the single character into a string. Now to declare it, we just do the char C or the char code equals. So you can either just declare it or you can declare it or set it, just like other variables. The operations, we can do things like determine if it's a letter. We can determine or turn it into a lowercase letter. We can turn it into a string. And there are actually many, many other character operations that we can perform on characters. This brings us up to our character exercise. Here you can do a demonstration where you, at line number 4, you declare a character C equal to the letter J, and then at line number 5 we display that value showing the letter J. At line number 8, notice we call the java.lang character.isLetter to determine if it is a letter. Of course this is, so it would be true. On the other hand, at line number 11, we call the isDigit method. And the isDigit, of course, the letter J is not a digit, so that would return false. And we see the output there. And then at line 14, we do a toLowercase, and we see that it takes that capital J and converts it into a lowercase, and we see the output there on the right-hand side.